Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we are about to start the next technical session, post-lunch session. As always, a little difficult to start with, but thanks for joining us immediately after lunch. And we will start and expect that people will join, trickle in just when we after we start. So this is a very interesting technical discussion going to happen now. The buzzword today is social stock exchange. Everyone is excited about that, but we don't know exactly what is happening and how to go about it. So this session titled as Democratizing Giving, the role of social stock exchange. For this session, we have a very eminent panelist, uh, led by, or may I say moderated by, Miss Aparna Suresh, co-lead at Community Action Lab. Let's give her a big round of applause. May I invite you on stage, please? Thank you. And joining her on the panel are Miss Jyotsna Sitling, member of Advisory Committee, SEBI, on Social Stock Exchange. Kausal Kumar at National Stock Exchange. Mr. Karthikeya Desai, founder and CEO at Desai and Associates. Dr. Sunil Kumar Gupta, Chief Executive Officer, ICMAI, Social Auditors Organization. So I hope this session is going to be very interesting. Over to you, Aparna, now. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Great. Yes, post-lunch sessions are quite difficult, but thank you all for joining us, and we hope to have a very engaging session with all of your inputs and, of course, our eminent panel today. The Social Stock Exchange is a groundbreaking initiative by the Government of India with great potential to transform the work that we do in social impact and also in the domain of livelihood development and interventions. So before we get started, though, I would just like to do a quick sense check of who we have in the audience. How many of you are nonprofits, CSOs, CBOs? Quick show of hands, please. Okay, half of the audience, I would say. Okay, how many of you label yourselves as social enterprises? Any social enterprise in the house? Okay, a few. Great. Some folks raise their hands twice. Interesting. And what about people who are currently aware of the concept, or rather, how many of you know of the social stock exchange? Okay. When you say you know the social stock exchange, are you familiar with it? Do you know it well? How many folks over here know it well enough? Okay, great. That's a few hands. That gives us more context. All right. A couple of more questions. How many of you are in the process of trying to register yourself in the social stock exchange or have tried in the past? Any of you here who've done that? Anyone who's already registered? Okay, great. All right, access, of course. Great. So I think on that note, we're going to do a bit of context setting and do a bit of unpacking of opportunities, learnings, challenges, and solutions that exist through a platform like the Social Stock Exchange. But before that, I'd like to turn the mic to my esteemed panelists and provide them an opportunity to introduce themselves so that you know about the role that they're playing in the SSC ecosystem. And then we get started off after that. So over to you, ma'am, Jyotsna ma'am, if you can start off, please.
Thank you very much, Aparna, for handing over this mic, and thank you, Access, for giving us this wonderful opportunity to be here with esteemed panel members to speak about social stock exchange. So normally it's said that जिसका समय आ गया वो कोई नहीं रोक सकता. So I think this is the time of democratizing giving. It's very, very important right now. So coming to my own introduction, this is me, Jyotsna Sitling, and my association with social enterprise goes long back to 2014, before than that also, as a joint secretary in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So when we had to develop the National Policy for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship 2015, so I was interested to keep a chapter on social enterprise. So there we had advocated for a social marketplace. So given that we kept on pursuing with different ministries, ultimately it was the finance ministry who took the lead and gave this responsibility to SEBI to constitute social stock exchange. So this is a brief history of mine. I am basically an Indian Forest Service officer, former Indian Forest Service officer. Now I am in the advisory committee to SEBI on social stock exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much, everybody, for having me here. I'm feeling quite, excited today to be a part of this panel. Uh, I have worked in the sector for 10 years and then exported to National Stock Exchange to look after social stock exchange. And I have worked, designed, and implemented projects across different sector. Different thematic areas in health, education, climate change, and all for different multilaterals, donors, and foundations. And right now, I'm looking after social stock exchange at National Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaushal.
Thank you very much, and to Access for having us here. Uh, my name is Karthik Desai. I've basically worked in impact investing and innovative finance for most of my career, for about 25 years. I used to actually be an investor with an organization called Asha Impact, which which deployed capital. And for the last 3 to 4 years, I've been running an advisory firm called Desai and Associates, which advises mostly funders, but also social enterprises and NGOs on the spectrum of capital, as we call it, which includes catalytic philanthropy, impact investment, and innovative finance.
Thanks, Karthik.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Access, for inviting me to this exciting session that we're going to have on social stock exchange. I'm Dr. S.K. Gupta, having spent over 43 years in the corporate sector. Currently, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Social Auditors Organization, which is one of the pillars of social stock exchange. We are duly recognized by SEBI to act as self-regulatory organization in the domain of social stock exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. As you may have seen, we have quite a diverse panel here representing policymakers and people from the perspective of regulators, as well as the experience of social impact organizations at large. But it might be interesting to notice that we don't actually have a nonprofit on the panel, and that wasn't by design or accident. Incidentally, we were supposed to have Mr. Mangesh Wange, CEO of Swadesh Foundation, here on this panel. Unfortunately, he was unable to make it today due to ill health. And of course, we will miss his inputs today. But in the meantime, he's been kind enough to record a message for us, which we would like to play for you before we get the conversation started. If we can play the video, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Mangesh Wange, CEO of Swadesh Foundation. I'm really sorry to miss this event in person because I'm recovering from a surgery. However, I would like to first of all thank the organizers for really putting this event together so well and around livelihoods. Coming to the Swadesh Foundation's experience on social stock exchange and to the theme around how philanthropic money is being channelized for livelihoods is a great platform, and Government of India has done a beautiful, very valuable concept of bringing social stock exchange where a lot of retail investors can participate, and especially HNIs who can actually contribute and they want to contribute and they do contribute for social causes. However, we find most of the support comes for health and education, and livelihood normally is not on the top of the list. And reasons are many. Either they are not aware of various livelihoods, especially for rural India, but also it is a little long-term kind of a thing. And also many times there's a big question mark on the quality of the organizations and NGOs especially. Now, this is where stock exchange has played a very important role. It is bringing visibility, transparency, and building the credibility of the organizations and also of the projects. But at the same time, it provides an opportunity for NGOs to list their projects and special livelihood projects. Like Suresh has been able to raise 10 crores, and livelihood has been one of the major amount of money which we have been able to raise, especially for skilling, also for growth. Now, in skilling, especially for women entrepreneurship, it is very important the way we highlight our projects, and it is adding huge confidence and visibility to the donor, and it is helping also the NGOs. So I believe overall a very good opportunity. The early days, I'm sure things are going to improve for very marginal, poor farmers or people in rural India who want to come out of poverty. And social stock exchange can really bring unrestricted grant for them to really come out of poverty. So look forward to more deliberations and learn from the whole deliberations at this conference. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Mangeshji. And lastly, I'm Aparna, your moderator for the day. I'm from the Community Action Collab, which is a network of 300 plus organizations working on fostering the resilience of vulnerable communities and helping them deal with everyday crises. And on that note, I would like to get the conversation kick-started with you, Jyotsna ma'am. Clearly, we have an audience that's very excited to know more about the social stock exchange, and they've been honest enough to confess that they don't know enough about it. So, why don't we start off with the journey of the social stock exchange started by you? And then, Kaushal, it would be great if you could come in from your perspective and experience with the NSC when it comes to the kind of journey that we've seen with organizations that are listed on the stock exchange so far.
So when the hands were raised, I think it prompted us to tell a bit about social stock exchange. So it was in maiden budget speech of 2019 when finance minister announced social stock exchange. That flagship announcement was done, but there was no ecosystem on the ground. Yeah. So SEBI formed two committees. One was working group on social stock exchange, which largely formed the overall norms, how the exchange should operate, followed by a technical group that worked into nitty-gritties on how to operationalize social stock exchange. So given those learnings, given all those reports and learnings that could derive from these two reports, social stock exchange was formed in 2022. In July 2022, and after that, a number of committees to operationalize, especially the advisory committee to suggest the working norms on social stock exchange and work with them and evolve many more norms in times to come. This advisory committee was formed. So given that, I would also like to tell you, why market capital related organization was vested with this, activity of social stock exchange. Yeah, with this responsibility of social stock exchange. And I can also tell you that social stock exchange has been tried world over in the last 15, 20 years. Yeah. So, but not very successful, I can say. Like Brazil, Brazil, Africa, Portugal, and UK, Canada, Jamaica, Singapore, they have all tried. So, and mostly where the social stock exchange have been successful, they are for profits. For not for profits, it's not very successful. So given all these learnings, why India should succeed? And what we are looking forward in terms of, why India should succeed is, so it is the first time in the world any government organization has taken the lead to form social stock exchange, basically. And it has leveraged SEBI experience in terms of governance, in terms of frameworks, in terms of ecosystem that is there. And what I could also let you know is there is a foolproof market mechanism to operationalize, and also there is a piece of social audit to establish and sustain the initiative. And at the same time, yes, government has understood it needs a lot of capacity building effort. So there is 100 crore fund institutionalized through a capacity building committee, and it is parked at NABARD to help different stakeholders, especially the NPOs, to to get to for awareness and education on social stock exchange. And most importantly, government has gone into the instrument of zero coupon, zero principle. uh, I can say it's an instrument, it's not a bond. It's like a grant, uh, which operates like philanthropy only. Only thing is that the impact needs to be created. Outcome needs to be very clear and impact needs to be created. So what I feel personally is that government has jumped so many regulations, ICD and LODR regulation, to make this social stock exchange established. And still we are, day in and day out, whatever learning comes from the implementers, we are very quick to exchange amongst ourselves and make due amendments to the regulations to help it make it work. Yes, I can understand in the initial phase it's difficult, but once now the momentum is gathering, then I just had requested access that it's time to share with the larger audience, uh, and share and take the, what I can say, take the support of larger audience to make this beautiful framework and the platform which has been crafted out to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insightful understanding of the journey of the SSC. Kaushal, if I can invite you to come in on what are the trends that you've seen so far? If you
Yeah,
can give us a bit on the
surely.
figures.
So thank you so much, ma'am, for setting the context. And when we talk about the numbers, like in India, there are more than 33 lakhs NGOs, and unfortunately, they are more than schools in India, right? But still, we are struggling for funding. We are struggling for meeting those development targets, right? So that is where the biggest, the reason is credibility that we all are suffering with, right? And how to get that credibility? I mean, it's with transparency, right? So after the introduction of social stock exchange, we can see that it's taken care by, run by exchanges, and exchanges are nothing but another name of trust, right? And once you register yourself or list your project on social stock exchange, you have to be transparent, you have to share all the documents, and transparency gives you a lot of credibility as well. So that's how, like, out of all those 33 lakhs, and if you talk about that Darpan platform, there are 2.75 lakhs NPOs. But for a donor, just imagine that you are a donor and you have to select one NGO out of 2.75 lakhs. How will you do due diligence, right? So that is where this social stock exchange enables you to go with the right set of NPOs, select that. So that's one benefit, but there's so many indirect benefits also that we are seeing. The biggest is visibility, right? So once you are registered and you are going to certain donors pitching your project, because anyways this is a parallel platform, this does not stop you from raising fund through other platforms. So this is a kind of advantage you can show that we have completed this due diligence process. Second thing is, initially certainly, like, many of NPOs have found it very difficult while registering themselves. But now if you ask to anybody, they will say that this has helped us, this was a great learning opportunity for us through the entire process. Now you ask for any document, we have all those ready. So this has helped NPOs streamlining their documentation, right? So that is another thing. Visibility is like, so if I talk about another number for NSE, right now the number is uh, between both the exchanges, like, BSE and NSE, there are more than 150 NPOs registered. And then 10 listings are done, and they have raised almost like, 22 CR. And right now, the pipeline is having 9 NPOs going to raise further 25 crores cumulatively. 10 have raised 22 CR. And if we talk about the entire, the donor base, right? So till now, we have been capturing institutional donors, CSRs, and all those things. So certainly, social stock exchange helps us tap to retail donors as well. So you and I kind of people can also contribute to that, starting from 10,000 rupees only. So that will also help adding a lot to, you know, those meeting those sustainable development goals, which we find very difficult meeting those 2.5 trillion dollars, by 2030. So this is another thing. We will talk certain things in detail about challenges, processes, other, benefits in detail. But this is the context. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much, Kaushal. Very interesting examples there of how we have more NGOs in the country than the number of schools, right? And fundraising, of course, is a shrinking space in the country, one would think, but the SSC therefore offers a great opportunity for us to leverage. And that's exactly what we want to get into next. The title of the session, as you know, is Democratizing Giving, the role of the SSC. And so on that note, I want to invite Karthik to come in. With your extensive experience in innovative finance and working with philanthropists and investors, what do you see as the value proposition of the social stock exchange from the supply and demand side?
Sure. So I'll try to, build upon what Jyotsna ma'am talked about in terms of the history and all the evolution of the SSC and the stats that Kaushal just gave, which are clearly showing that there is a lot of activity happening, at least on the supply side. You have a lot of registrations and a few listings happening. On the demand side, it's not as active. In one word, the value proposition of the SSE is credibility. This is why it exists, right? But there's, let's say, 4 types of credibility. So let's go through each one. Market credibility, capital credibility, impact credibility, and process credibility. So on the first one, it's extremely strong, right? The whole logic of an SSE is you have data, transparency, information availability, discoverability. It's an actual market. The process, I was also a small part of this process when I was at Asha Impact. I was just looking at the notes, all the comparisons to the other countries that have done it. Ours is like one of the most credible social stock exchanges. It's often in our own ecosystem, since we're in it, we criticize, which is understandable, the challenges, even with the CSR law. But the truth is, we're one of the few countries with a CSR law and with a SSE, which is part of the main board. It's governed by SEBI. And India has one of the most sophisticated capital market regulators ecosystems in the world. It's more sophisticated than many Western European countries. So that part is very strong. The SSC was put in place so that, sorry if this analogy is too pithy, but if I ask a friend to invest in, let's say, a stock of HDFC, it's not assumed that he should know what that is. So I can just show him the ticker and tuck, 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 he can see what it is. I can't do that for NGOs. We may all know what an Access does or what a Teach for India does or what a Pradhan does. But if I tell my neighbor, hey, why don't you donate to this NGO? It's like, what NGO? He has to go and Google the thing. So that is the first credibility. So they're building a real market for it, governed by SEBI. The second thing is the reason for it is pooling of capital. That's really the main benefit. That an entity can now, instead of going to multiple donors, pool that project and get capital from multiple donors. Let's be honest, that part is a bit constrained. The capital credibility. The capital is not flowing, the liquidity, because you need a market-making mechanism. The investors are not quite there yet. NGOs are reliant to do their own funding. And we can get into those challenges. So capital credibility is low. That's why it's stuck. The third is kind of medium, which is impact credibility, right? It gives common language around impact. They've used those broad categories around CSR. Some of us who were part of the earlier discussions had tried to give them very specific language around impact and making it very technical, but they've correctly gone for a broader approach. But the real part of that is the audit, right? That this is impact that is measured. And it dramatically increases the credibility of the whole sector. And the fourth part is process credibility. I would like to think that's pretty high, thanks to the BSC, thanks to the NSC, thanks to all of the ecosystem players. There's a large number of listings, and process is fairly well established, and so on. So this is, to me, the 4 types of credibility and the value proposition. And challenges wise is really, how do you get the capital to flow? Happy to share examples of that. Happy to share what's happened in the livelihood space. And the other key thing to think about is some of the new instruments that are possible. It's not just for channeling grants through ZCZP, but it could be used for outcome-based funding. So I'm happy to
Definitely.
touch upon that later on as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those four paradigms. And I think we'll definitely like to do a deep dive on that. But you spoke of impact credibility, and I think there's no better person placed here than Dr. Gupta to come in on that with his extensive experience with the ICMAI Social Auditors Organization. Sir, if you could come in on what your experience has been since you've been engaging so actively with so many nonprofits, what has been your overall experience in terms of the impact credibility side of things?
So we all very, very enthusiastically celebrated Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, 75 years of completion of India's political freedom. And we all naturally took stock as to where we are today as a nation. And we are very proud to be fifth largest economy of the world today, out of 195 odd countries in the world. But on the other side, there is also a stark reality that the development that has happened in the country hasn't been truly inclusive in the sense that is what we expected and that is what we desired and wanted. And therefore, in the next 25 years, that's Amrit Kal, culminating with 100 years of India completing its political independence in 2047, the whole focus of the entire ecosystem in the country is towards building up inclusive development, inclusive growth, getting people out from the bottom of the pyramid, trying to help those people who are underserved, less privileged kind of thing. And that's where the social sector and the non-profit organizations have a very, very critical and pivotal role to play. The kind of challenges that NPOs face in delivering that last mile connectivity and the last mile benefit to the people at the ground level we are all aware about that. We have challenges of getting access to funding. There is a challenge of credibility, reputation, continuity of funding year on year on. The process of setting up a social stock exchange is going to hopefully change all that in terms of providing easy access for the credible NPOs who get registered on the social stock exchange, either with NSE or with BSE. And the whole process of generating funds is no longer going to be only dependent upon handful of donors who you contacted personally and were helping you out year after year, providing funds for various projects, but now possibly going forward, the whole process is going to be democratized. Someone sitting in Northeast willing to support a particular cause which is close to his heart would be willing to put money through the channel and the portal of social stock exchange, even if they don't personally know who the founder of that particular NGO is, but they would be able to lend funds, donate funds, contribute funds to that particular channel and to that particular project. Now, in terms of administrative structure that has been created to operationalize social stock exchange, we have SEBI as the super regulator. Then we have the two stock exchanges which actually register and allow listing of NPOs at the marketplace. And the third pillar is that means self-regulatory organizations. There are three of them existing in the marketplace as of today. I represent one, that is ICMAI Social Auditors Organization. This is a Section 8 company promoted by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, which is a statutory body set up under an Act of Parliament. And the key functions that we perform are, we are actually the frontline regulators. We get in touch with NPOs, we get in touch with the donors and try to build traction amongst both of them towards galvanizing in terms of getting connected with social stock exchange. We also look at capacity building for both NPOs as well as the social impact assessors. And we also register people who qualify the exam conducted by SEBI and who become social impact assessors. Because one of the key underlying theme of getting registered on the social stock exchange is that every year you will have to get yourself audited. Earlier we used to use the term social auditor, but SEBI in its board meeting held in November 2023 has now changed the terminology. They now call it social impact assessment. And that is not going to be carried out by a chartered accountant or any other professional. For conducting social impact assessment, you got to pass an exam conducted by SEBI and then also get yourself enrolled with one of the self-regulatory organizations. Then you are entitled and become licensed to conduct social impact assessment. As of now, we have almost about 800 social impact assessment people available in the marketplace to take this forward. SEBI guidelines also give you an opportunity that people from development sector can also become social impact assessors, thus creating a new professional opportunity for them. If you are a graduate, you need to have minimum 6 years experience in development sector. And if you are a postgraduate, you need to have minimum 3 years experience in the development sector. Of course, subject to your also qualifying the exam conducted by SEBI and then enrolling yourself with a self-regulatory organization. So over the period of last about 2 years, we've been trying to get in touch with various NPOs by way of orientation awareness programs pan-India. We have conducted over 25 programs in different cities, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And the most encouraging aspect, in fact, had been very significant number of women taking part in those programs. I mean, that's very, very encouraging to note and notice. And we have also tried to provide capacity building both for the NPOs in terms of their understanding of the whole structure and mechanics, how the SSC actually works, and also for the social impact assessors. Because as of now, people who have qualified the SEBI exam and they have become social impact assessors, they are all or mostly from the finance background. Chartered accountants, cost accountants. They have huge experience of working with the corporate entities, but possibly they don't really have the level of understanding of the social sector and the NPOs with which they are going to be now associated. So we are also trying to bridge the gap in terms of capacity building for the social impact assessors and also from the perspective of NPOs with a view to creating awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. I think what we can see here is clearly a trend of lots of wins for the social impact sector, but also something that seems relatively process heavy and therefore daunting to many organizations, especially smaller NGOs, right? But I think before we get into what are the quick wins, what does the process look like, and what are really the challenges that you might face along the way, we'd like to throw the floor open for questions from all of you. If there are any interim thoughts or comments before we deep dive into the other aspects of this conversation. Any quick clarifications or thoughts? We'll pause for a few seconds. Yes, please. Gentleman at the back, if we can just have a mic. Yes, sir.
Sorry if I missed the basics of this session, but my curiosity is to know that the basic principle behind investing is to get returns. Yeah? So until and unless the returns are there, how the exchange supposed to function and operate and sustain itself? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think Jyotsna ma'am will answer that.
So here the return is the social return we'll get. We will not give financial return. Especially for the NPOs, there is a special instrument called zero coupon, zero principal instrument, which is like donation basically. Okay. So given that it's the, what I can say, it's the social currency we create through proper impact assessment by upfront, coming out what the NPO would like to achieve in the overall objective and how these objectives in terms of, which is in terms of outcome would like to bring out in terms of objectively verifiable key performance indicator. So that is the crux of getting the social capital out of financial capital, which will come as funding into the social projects. or environmental projects and even cultural projects. Thank you.
May I?
Thank you. Please, over to you,
Yeah.
Kaushik, please.
So coming back to the topic of the discussion is democratizing giving, right? So this platform also allows you and I to contribute to some causes. There are so many donors, but why we don't contribute? Because we have a big question on the credibility of the implementation of that project, right? Or the NPO. So this is also an opportunity to change the behavior of population, where despite spending certain amount on celebrating my birthday, I decide to uh, donate to some project on social stock exchange, because I know that that NPO is credible and they are raising some fund for certain project, and at the end of the project I will have that opportunity to go through their impact assessment report as well. I'll be able to see where my money has been utilized, and that gives us immense satisfaction. So this is how it is, and there are certain instrument also that he'll be talking about where are returns as well. So we will go through that, but certainly right now what ZCZP says that you donate and what you get is like social satisfaction, because you know that your money is being utilized for the project and going to the beneficiary or the end user of the project. Thank you.
Add to that.
Yes, please.
Because this
Thanks,
question is
Kaushik.
very, just cuts to the heart of it, that investors want returns. So where are the returns? So as you know, the SSC has two components, the not-for-profit component and the for-profit component. So nomenclature, we should be precise about it. So social enterprises generally we mean for-profit social enterprise, and not-for-profit is NPO. So if you notice, most of the listings, if not all of them, is there a single for-profit that's been listed so far? There hasn't, right? But initially the committees happened. There were two different committees for for-profits and not-for-profits. So the for-profits have to generate a financial return, correct? So in impact investing, you've got finance first and impact first. How much should be that financial return? Should investors be willing to take a lower than market financial return or muted return? Should there be a trade-off between financial return and impact, social and environmental impact? These are difficult questions to answer. It creates what's known as the adverse selection problem. If I'm a social enterprise for profit and I list on the SEC, very good, because I say I'm social, but then I may not get the private commercial capital. Why don't I just list on the main exchange and show that I'm, and that is precisely what they're offering, that you list on the MSME board, but so that question applies much more to for-profit capital. For not-for-profit capital, you're only giving that money away for an environmental or impact goal. So what's needed there is, again, credibility, the templatization, the standardization, building a market so more and more people can give, and incentives. So you can incentivize that through ATG, through tax benefits, by allowing large pools of capital, which are currently not allowed, like CSR, let alone foreign capital, right? The money in India is growing very fast. There's, I think, 1.2 lakh CR of private giving in India. I don't know how the detailed breakup of that, but my people in my team and others here will probably have that. How much of that is going to small donations? How much of that is going to religious trusts, and so on? So it's about capturing that pool by providing pricing in terms of impact units. And that's what's really interesting and cool about this initiative.
If I could
Yes,
just add on to this, because this very critical aspect for all of us to understand and think through. Yes, as of now, we only have one instrument, which is zero coupon, zero principal. And the whole concept behind social stock exchange and NPO registering and listing on SFC is that people who are committed, passionate about a particular cause, they would give donations, they would give grants. The only thing is the money now is going to come through the platform and portable social stock exchange. One thing accepted. But on the other hand, going by the pure economics and the concept of rational human being, everybody, as you rightly said, wanting to put money somewhere is definitely expecting a return in real sense. That means in terms of financial return kind of thing. So possibly as a policy recommendation, I would like to put it here for the organizers to take note of and take it up at the appropriate level, that going forward, we would have to look at some instruments where there are going to be financial returns coupled with social return, with a view to actually building up the desired traction at the social stock exchange portal.
Thank you so much, sir. And as you can see, and thank you for that question, sir. Very important point indeed, in terms of what needs to be done to really take the social stock exchange to the next level. Right now, we're if you think of it, the journey in a couple of years has been quite impressive, but there's obviously miles to go in terms of the kind of instruments, the kind of policy changes that are needed. I know there's another question in the audience. We'll have to keep it very short because we do have other points to address. If you could just take the mic, please.
Hello, sir. I have just one question that why the for-profit organization can be listed in this social stock exchange, and what are the sustainability? Because many NPOs and NGOs are heavily involved with the grant donation. So, what are the sustainability wala part? And the second question is ki, why the for-profit organization can register, because they can also give to the CSRs and they can also open their own CSR initiative. So, I just have two questions. Yeah, thank you.
Again, very interesting question. I think, Karthik, if you'd like to come in on this one, particularly on what's in it for social enterprises to come into the exchange.
To be frank, it's not clear. So because it's a contradiction in terms, perhaps. And the Indian regulatory system has often kept the for-profit and the not-for-profit completely distinct. So this is a larger existential question that it assumes that there's a not-for-profit, which is very high impact. There's an enterprise, which is technically not impact, at least not intentional impact, because they are only focusing on profit maximization. They may have incidental impact. And then a social enterprise is that which is structured as a corporation company, so it can make revenues, but it has an intentional social impact. But it's subjective. How do you judge what is a social enterprise and what is not? And this whole impact investment industry has been grappling with this question. So there's no clear answer to that, unfortunately, that I can give here. I think that folks have, which is precisely why you don't see that many FPOs listing for-profit organizations, which are social enterprises. But to Sir's point, there is the scope for, the crux of it is muted returns. This is the word we have to focus on. That right now there's two kinds of investing. Impact investing, even though we put the word impact in front of it, and I'll speak this as someone who's been in impact investing industry association and all of that, it's only really about returns, and the impact is inbuilt. 25% IRR is what they target. That's a really high rate of return. And foundations, by definition, it's a 0% rate of return. So there's a huge space between 0% and 25%. A sustainable social enterprise that's doing maybe 5%, 10%, 15% return because it's working in a rural area or with low-income population cannot find an investor, because the impact investor will say, sorry, you're not the next unicorn. You can't give me 25% IRR. And the foundation will say, sorry, you're not an NGO. So we need to accept that there's muted returns, which are required to create social impact, and there are instruments, like, for example, returnable grants. So there, you give your money, but you get your money back. You could get it with a low rate of interest. That rate of interest could be linked to the social impact that you create, and it's precisely these kind of instruments, let's call them hybrid instruments, things in between for-profit and not-for-profit, where the SSC has potential. I'm not sure if that's a satisfactory answer, but those are some of the issues that it raises.
Yeah. So basically, when we talk about social stock exchange for for-profit and not-for-profit, so for NPOs, it's registration and listing. But for for-profit enterprises, there is no registration as such. They can come via SMEs or main board route. And that is where the only benefit they get is they are raising fund, but only difference is they will get a tag that they are social enterprise, just to promote social causes. And when we talk about that, how we decide that this organization is social enterprise, the definition for the first time through social stock exchange, it is defined that if 2/3 or 67% of your activities or your revenue, receipt of funding, or your beneficiaries, stakeholders, right? If they belong to those 17 sustainable goals, then they will be defined as social enterprises. And that is how this entire definition comes in place. And coming back to your question, that for-profit enterprises, it is totally different, and they will only get that tag. And as he mentioned that this is completely different, route of funding. So there is no conflict, there is no competition between FPE or NPOs, that both the channels are different, both the instruments are different. So both are separate things, yeah. So just in case if as for-profit enterprises, you want to come on social stock exchange, we have separate teams for main board and for SME listing. We can have a call around that and we can discuss about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kaushal. I think it's evident before we come to the next question that there's a larger credibility quotient and market building already in place for nonprofits, whereas it could be definitely worked on further for the for-profit social enterprises. We'll come into that again, but we have another question. Sorry, just ma'am.
So, over last 1.5 year, we have mostly worked for NPOs to build the system, because for FPAs there's already system existing. The Companies Act, whatever regulations are there in terms of compliance reporting, it's being done. For NPO system, there needed a lot of systems and processes to be built to make any NPO getting onboarded and be there to establish credibility in the long run. That we have completed, and first listings what we have tried, they are mostly NPOs. So we would like more of NPOs come, then the learnings would be better. So this is how we are moving.
Thank you. Sir, is that a burning question or can it wait till the end? And if not, let's keep it very quick. Yeah.
So I just want to understand that the small organization which don't have this ATG certificate, they cannot issue the ATG certificate. If that organization registered with the as a NPO, can we this stock exchange provide that ATG type of thing to the investor?
No, these are mandatory terms. So there are certain checklist of different documents, including this how you can put the primacy of social intent by proving that 67% of your activities or your beneficiaries come under these 17 things. Then income tax certificate, ATG. You talk about Darpan registration. Yeah, you also share some of the impact reports with us saying that we are working. So these are mandatory documentation, and also proving that you have 50 lakhs funding in 50 lakhs expenditure in a year and 10 lakhs of minimum funding in the last year. So these are the criteria. What we can do is, after certainly, if I can be shared by everybody's email IDs, I can share all those things separately through email, so that you will have clear cut all definitions and requirements and checklist of different documentation with you.
And the second thing is what we are experimenting in our project. We are providing fund which is called as a grant come loan. We are investing in the micro enterprises. They are setting up on the village or cluster level. So if that enterprise is working and gain profit, so we will treat it as a loan. So they have to return that money, and if they fail, then we will treat that money as a grant. So have we any
Sir,
thought on that?
yeah, so we have received certain queries from different NPOs, and they are doing the similar work. As of now, it depends on the primacy of your social intent. So it's a case to case basis that we can talk offline.
Definitely. I think I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that come in post the session, but just a minute, ma'am. Yeah. So essentially, we can see that there are a lot of questions coming in on the process and other aspects. But before we get into that particular point, I want to throw a question open on what is in it from the philanthropy side of things, right? I mean, how do we define the value proposition of the exchange for philanthropists? And I think I want to open that question out to Karthik. You did touch upon it briefly, but are there any sort of blended finance instruments or approaches that you could throw light on that could actually attract more investors and funders, both for social enterprises and as well as nonprofits? And if you could just give us some examples on what's really worked well on that front.
Sure. So I'll talk about what is outcome-based financing and give an example of livelihoods, since we're here at a livelihoods conference. So what's interesting to philanthropists? They're already giving money to different projects, right? But there's now new frontiers of philanthropy, right? There's collaborative philanthropy. Philanthropists want to pool their resources with others. There's like risk mitigation mechanisms. There's different ways, in which philanthropy is thinking, systemic change, and so on. But let's focus primarily on the main thing that philanthropists want, which is accountability, right? They want to know that their money is being well spent. So inherently, the SSC to some extent already gives them that, right? Because whether you're a retail philanthropist or whether you're a larger one, you're getting those social impact units and the measurement and all of that. But outcome-based financing is a construct which basically says we will only pay for outcomes. Now, this can be a milestone based payment. So, as the NGO achieves certain objectives, outputs, or outcomes, you pay them on an ongoing basis, or it can be like an incentive. You tell the NGO that I'll pay you 100 rupees for your main program, but if you achieve additional, like really good impact, then I'll give you some extra as an incentive. There's a well known concept globally, relatively well known, which is now coming into India, known as a social impact bond. Maybe some folks here have heard about it. What is a social impact bond? The philanthropist basically, I'll try to explain it as simply as possible, tells the NGO, you do your work, you perform, build a school, increase the learning levels. Let's stick to a livelihoods example. Uh, Drive an income increase of the farmers. Then there's issues around, is it attributable to the NGO? So you have to come up with a metric that works, and I'll pay you when that happens. Then how does the NGO get the upfront working capital? They get it through a risk investor. So a third party comes in, a philanthropist who's going to get his or her money back. So the risk investor gives the NGO 100 rupees. The NGO does XYZ work. That work is independently measured. And if it's successful, the risk investor gets their money back. And guess what? They get a pre-agreed rate of return. If the work was like pretty good, they'll get, if the work was not good, they're not going to get their money back. So that's why they're a risk investor. They're taking a chance on the NGO succeeding and delivering successfully. If the outcomes are very good, they'll make a certain return. So this is what an impact bond is. The challenge is that structuring these and all becomes very complicated and it's very bespoke. Enter the social stock exchange. The impact metrics are already kind of established, and it's not as far away as you guys think, right? There's a working group under the SSC right now working on the regulations for outcome-based instruments. The example that I'll share is of a large Indian state, okay, which has actually put together an outcome-based funding program, which my firm and others were helping them to design for livelihoods and healthcare. For livelihoods, they said we want to do something around the Lakhpati Didi initiative. We have NGOs and implementing partners like the well-known folks that you guys all know who are already doing this work. But how do we make it more outcome-based? So what is that outcome? It's opening of a bank account, right? It's the formalization of the business. So the business is actually a registered business, micro business. It's the application for a loan. It's the receipt of a loan from a scheduled commercial bank of 1 lakh rupees for a woman entrepreneur whose income is less than 1 lakh rupees. So you have to, so we get them to agree that that's a meaningful metric. You may not be able to measure her income. So that becomes the initiative. A risk investor comes in, funds such NGO. The NGO is able to list this as a ZCZP on the social stock exchange through what's known as a non-convertible debenture. They're like raising a loan from their friendly donor, whoever their donor is who's giving them that money. They do the project, and if the project is successful, the government of this large Indian state funds the NGO, saying, here you go, you did a good job, here's your money. The NGO can pay back its donor. I know that I went pretty fast there, but just to show you that this stuff is happening at the highest levels, the SSC, and we should give credit to the National Stock Exchange, they're really taking a pioneering role here, is trying to get some of these basic outcome-based funding contracts and slightly more complicated ones like social impact bonds. And regulations are being worked out to allow this. So this is why philanthropists think that it's not just a direct one-way ZCZP thing. There's many tools and a lot of application to this in livelihoods. I think almost a third of the NGOs listed are dealing in livelihoods on the NSC, or is it like half? Half, 50%. 50% of the activities are related to livelihoods.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that could be attributed to the outcome-based nature of livelihood interventions, right? And I think, in general, when it comes to inflection points in philanthropy, everyone has a different rationale for giving. But Kaushal, if I can ask you this question, I believe the NSC has been receiving some queries from corporates and other organizations about what nonprofits they can work with, not just with respect to which organizations have been registered so far, but even otherwise. So I think it's interesting to see the change in mindsets, perhaps larger on a larger point, the narrative building for the social impact sector. So if you could just throw some light on that and how the National Stock Exchange has sort of dealt with that journey with these external stakeholders.
Yeah, so certainly when we started, a social stock exchange, so the first thing was to create awareness among NPOs, right? So that they will come on the platform, register themselves and see that how they can leverage the platform for fundraising. Gradually, I mean, certainly that is giving a lot of visibility to them. But one of the indirect benefits that we are seeing, we have started seeing is like many of the foundations and many of the CSR wings, they are approaching us and asking, okay, so CSR will come maybe in future, maybe someday. And even if it comes, maybe it will be marginal. So we understand that you have done all the due diligence of the NPO. So can you suggest us that we are based out of Bombay and we want to fund some intervention in Mumbai, and we want to support some education or like some disadvantaged community. So can you suggest 2 or 3 NPOs that we can fund directly to them? So we have started doing that for sure. Certainly that will not be counted as a part of social stock exchange, but these are the benefits. I mean, apart from what we had thought of before, that we talk about like 10 listings, 22 CR, fundraising and all those things. Certainly those things cannot be coming on social stock exchange, but these are the indirect benefits happening. Same time, when raising funds, those NPOs are going to different donors for CSR funding also. They are showcasing that, see, we are registered on social stock exchange, and few of them have come up with the feedback that we have been given that appointment to pitch our project because they believe in exchanges and social stock exchange, their process of due diligence and all those things.
Thanks, Kaushal. I think also to look at it from the perspective of the social stock exchange itself. Jyotsna ma'am, if I can ask you this question, what is the thinking around the ease of doing business for nonprofits that the social stock exchange is looking at? And if I can also throw that open to the other panelists to come in on, how are we encouraging and creating awareness for nonprofits and social enterprises to come on board to the SSC? It seems like a daunting process for some. So how are we addressing that bridging the gap in terms of queries or understanding processes or easing that process? So, ma'am, if I can request you to come in on that first.
So, in terms of ease of doing business, the essence of NPOs, it NPO के एसेंस को निखारना एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण काम है. आई एम जस्ट स्पीकिंग इन हिंदी ऑल्सो. सो इसमें जिस प्रकार के स्पेस दिया गया है, हम कोशिश करते हैं कि मैक्सिमम स्पेस एनपीओस को मिले कि उनका अपना नैरेटिव क्रिएट करके अपने सोशल सेक्टर को बढ़ावा दें जिस पर वो लोग काम कर रहे हैं, है ना. तो इसमें क्या है कि इसमें कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि सीएसआर जैसा, थोड़ा मेरे को हिंदी में बोलने दीजिए तो इसमें मेरे को अच्छा लगेगा क्योंकि ये मूल बात है. इसमें क्या है कि कोई सॉल्यूशन ड्रिवन प्रिंसिपल से हम नहीं चल रहे हैं जैसे सीएसआर में कभी कभी होता है. जैसे फंडर देना चाहें 1 साल के लिए 2 साल के लिए, मैं इस चीज के लिए सपोर्ट करना चाहते हो तो ये पैसा ले लो, है ना. तो आपको क्या है कि उसमें क्या है कि कोई एक ऑप्शन नहीं है. देन why I'm telling the big space is that provided you are driven by your own narrative and you have your own mission and you have a desire to create impact, timeline, no, there's no foundation of timeline. There's no foundation of for what amount you are going to pitch for. All right. And at the same time, even choosing social impact assessors, that will be done by the NPOs only. So, which impact assessor is good, which impact assessor is not good, you'll be coming to know. Even for impact assessors, now they will have to prove. All right. So, I think this is very, very, why I'm telling it's democratizing. It will give you, a vast space to create your own narrative. Now, in terms of coming to the surety, what happens, which I've seen normally, even if our NPOs, they want to create impact, not become very much sure whether funding will continue or not. Now there is a, what I can say is a glass ceiling. Yeah. Even if you want, you desire, you'll not be able to attain because you are not sure of funding next year. So even by desiring the impact, you are not being able to attain because because of not the fault of yours, it is the fault of the system, basically. Yeah. So that surety you will get in social stock exchange, because you are commanding everything from the bottom, and there is a vast scope for bottom up growth and creating the real narrative for the sector which you would like to work for. So for ease of doing business, I think this is the principle. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Gupta, if you could
Can I
comment
just
on the point.
add on to this? I mean, any donor, philanthropist wanting to commit his funds for a particular cause, the basic process that he would follow is he will do due diligence of the NPO and then also do the due diligence of the specific project for which he is going to possibly commit his funds. And the beauty of the concept of social stock exchange is that NSE and BSE, both exchanges, have a very, very comprehensive, robust process of doing due diligence. So once an NGO gets registered, I think from the donor's perspective, they need not bother about the due diligence of the NPO. They can only simply look at doing the due diligence of the project and then possibly decide to commit their funds. I mean, that's a great advantage that an NPO would get once it gets registered at the stock exchange.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. So clearly a bottom-up approach and also looking at empowering nonprofits and social enterprises, but also looking at ways in which donors can expand their investing portfolio. But just to come to, and I have been given a heads up about us running out of time, and I'd like to reserve some time for more questions. So just very quickly coming into the area of policy changes. One part clearly has been highlighted that CSR funds are not part of the investing mechanism currently, and that could potentially be a huge area. What, in the opinion of the esteemed panelists here, are some of the key policy changes that we want to bring to the social stock exchange? Kaushal, Karthik, if I can request you to come in on this. Any thoughts on policy changes?
So everything is happening in real time, right? So when we talk about the changes in last 1.5 years only, it's been very dynamic. So initially the minimum size was 1 CR. Now it's 50 lakhs only. Initially the target was to tap HNIs and ultra HNIs. So the minimum contribution was 2 lakhs. Now it's 10,000 only to democratize giving, right? So it's all happening in real time. Same time, ZCZP was one instrument where it was like to come with one instrument, succeed with that, and then talk about other things, and hence this outcome based funding is in process. So everything is changing in real time and things are happening after taking all the feedback from the ecosystem. So things are all aligned, even action is aligned. So it's happening, and what to say, like every day and every month we are seeking some sort of feedback. After this discussion also we may have some of the insights that we will be sharing with the different people, like SEBI exchanges and all those things. So there are our advisory committee as well, so she is there, she will be conveying all those things. So it's happening as and when we are encountering something or listening to something from our ecosystem. So that's how it's going. So
I'll just briefly add. So ultimately, it's the capital side that needs addressing, right? So you need more capital, and you need to fix some of the regulatory and structuring issues. So ATG permission was given only recently. CSR, if it comes in, it would obviously bring a huge pool of capital. Retail participation is still not fully there. You need to be more of an accredited investor. So how do you bring more capital? And regulations wise, these instruments, right now there's only one instrument. So it's really about working out the niggles. And tomorrow, if an outcome based instrument can be listed, if a state government can finance a project that it supports, that would really help. But I think, I just wanted to also give a philosophical point here that, we're talking so much about all these things, but this Professor Priyanshu Gupta has written something very interesting, which is that relying on a market for NPOs is paradoxical, because the NPOs are actually seeking to correct for market failure. Income inequality, environmental degradation. But that is exactly where the promise also lies. That it can create a self-correcting market mechanism which addresses the social problems. So I think overall that is the key takeaway for me. And markets are ultimately about the discovery of projects. So if the liquidity market making concerns can be brought into to focus, every exchange has a market maker. There's no market makers here. The NGOs have to go and fund their own. There's no investment bankers for these listings. So there's a range of not just regulations, but more like institutional factors, and yes, some regulatory tweaks to allow more types of capital to come in, to allow more instruments, and to kind of push more capital to flow through the exchange. That in one line is what's going to make this endeavor successful. On the supply side, everyone here has done such a fantastic job. It's amazing to see the journey. Like I remember 1 year ago, people were not really, questioning it, and now so many people are listing. The minute the capital starts to flow, it'll become like the floodgates will open up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karthik. Before Dr. Gupta comes in, I think since we're approaching the end of the session, if I can summarize your key takeaway for the audience present here, it would be a self-correcting market mechanism that you see the SC as, which is very interesting, paradoxical but interesting. Dr. Gupta, if I can request you to come in, a bit of a challenge here for all panelists actually. If you can summarize in just a couple of lines, what is your key takeaway for our audience today when it comes to the social stock exchange, and what would you like to leave them with as a parting message?
So, of course, you have heard all of us, and many of you would have known about social stock exchange even before coming for this particular session. And possibly some interest has been triggered in your minds. You'll probably go back home, look at Google, look at some other source by which you'll try to get some more information. End of the day, it's your call. I mean, each NPO has to take a call at their own governing body level, whatever, whether you would like to get registered and thereafter go on to the next stage of listing also or not. But what I can say from the perspective of being a member of the Social Stock Exchange Advisory Committee, I represent Institute of Cost Accountants of India. So the amount ceiling for raising funds on the social stock exchange was earlier 1 crore. It was brought down to the level of 50 lakhs as of now. But we do a lot of programs. We connect with a lot of people at the ground level. There is a call and there is a feeling amongst the NPOs that even 50 lakhs is a high limit, high threshold fixed for raising of capital. It should be brought down further. I mean, that's what we hear when we go around talking to people, creating awareness orientation program. They want this limit to be pegged down to little lower. Similarly, in terms of individual contribution, which is as of now pegged at 10,000 rupees, they say this threshold should also come down. Instead of 10,000, maybe allow, for example, 5,000 rupees contribution also being an eligible contribution, valid contribution for social stock exchange listing. What we offer is a help desk as an organization, as a governing regulatory body recognized by SEBI. We have a help desk, we have a query solution desk. I would leave the contact details with the organizers. Anyone of you wanting to get to know anything about the process, the concept, the philosophy, anything of that sort, we are just a call away, we are just an email away. Anyone, if you can get in touch with us, we can work together towards building up the ecosystem for the social stock exchange.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. We're at the close of our session. And so before we conclude, clearly you have offers here already from the NSC and the ICMAI SAO in terms of reaching out and getting your queries clarified and taking the conversation forward in the work that you want to do with the SSC. Thank you to all of you for being a great audience, but I'd also like to thank our esteemed panelists, Dr. S.K. Gupta, Kartikeya Desai, Kaushal Kumar, and Ms. Jyotsna Sitling for your very insightful comments and inputs during today's session. And of course, a big thank you to Access Development Services for putting together this wonderful platform and allowing us to really socialize the concept of the social stock exchange and help to take that agenda forward. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for being such a wonderful audience. See you.
So thanks a lot to all the panelists for demystifying a lot of concepts around social stock exchange. Definitely, I learned a lot of things. And special thanks to Aparna. I must congratulate that you moderated the session very well and engaged the audience very well from the beginning. Very refreshing. Yeah, so good. And thanks to the audience for the engaging questions. Very nice, good, conceptually very clear questions. Thank you everyone. I would request everyone to panelists to come forward for a picture and yes, please, and hand over the token of